So a common mistake that people make when they're working on this is that they work directly on their image. You don't want to do that. In fact, I'm going to make a duplicate and I'm going to call this black and white. Now keep in mind, this is not the file that would be submitted. This is the file you'd work in. And when you're done, you would go ahead and copy out the 3 completed layers. That would be the black and white image, which I have a typo there, so watch out for that. The original photo, and then the colorize image as well. So I'm just going to turn that one off. So we have that stashed away as well. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and toss all of these guys right in this group and call it prep, just so that I've got it. All right. So if there are times when you will need to draw directly on a layer, what you'll want to do is duplicate that section and then work on it. So for example, if I just came in and for some reason I needed just this section, I'd be more careful. I'd come in with the quick mask mode and I'd do the necessary adjustments there. I seem to be set to overlay, so make sure I'm in the normal mode. Maybe crank up the hardness. And so I'd come in, do whatever necessary adjustments need to be done, you know, flipping back and forth, carefully working on it. When everything's set, I would just copy paste that one segment. Now, if I absolutely had to, let's turn that off, I have this one piece that I can work on. All right. So if that's the case, you know, go ahead, but I would not recommend working directly on the whole image. Now, another mistake that people tend to make is to think that color is the only blending mode to use. So watch out for this too. If you're recoloring an image, you rarely want to use color because that will adjust both the saturation and the hue. However, if you are working on a black and white image, you will have to use color because there is no hue to replace. It's just black and white. So watch out for that. So that is an option. I tend to reserve color for the mid-tone areas. It sticks very well. If you have a very bright area, things like overlay tend to work quite nicely. So I've accidentally placed this original image there. I don't want to do that. There we go. I'm going to create an overlay layer. Now watch out, the colors that you select on overlay will not look the same because overlay above 50% will brighten, below 50% will darken. So you're not going to get a true to tone image. So see how it's changing? Here's another mistake that people tend to make. They'll do 100% and wonder why it looks bad. Rarely is color like some kind of gel that's just rubbed across things. You'll want to build up slowly. So let's just do a 9%. And you can see that I can touch this in just a little bit. And I can swap out the colors as well. Now keep in mind, we're not limited to just hue. We also have saturation, brightness, and more importantly, we have some crazy stuff in the lab colors. And we haven't talked about lab yet. We'll save that for later. It is a great way though to switch between things like, say, color complements. If we want to go from red to green, we could be in the A channel. To shift between different tonalities, we can dim this down. So frequently when you're selecting colors, you don't even want to be in hue. You'll want to try these and see how life treats you. You can get some absolutely amazing color selections just by going in there. All right, and so I'm working just in the highlight areas with overlay. Now you say, okay, great, what about the darker areas? Well, for that, I'm going to go ahead and try multiply. As soon as I select multiply, I went right past it. And it will stick in. Let me, for effect, just crank this up to 100% by clicking 0 on my keyboard at the top of the screen. You can see that I'm burning straight in. And it applies well to the dark areas, but it also darkens them, so keep that in mind. Essentially, you can do some contrast adjustments at the same time that you're doing your coloring, just by going in. Now, here's another issue that people tend to forget about. They're going to want to, you're going to want to label everything. So we'll call this the front right slice highlights, because otherwise you're going to lose track of it immediately, and you'll have a lot of layers, so you'll want to be very, very careful about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and just try doing a few of these highlights. Now you'll notice right away, how do we target these highlights specifically? Well, there are a couple of things you can do. One of the easiest, well, you could go into the channels and you could select the best looking channel, and then you could find one that you think would work well because it has high contrast, and you'd make a new layer, which would be an alpha mask at that point. You'd copy this channel and you'd paste it in to the other location, and I accidentally grabbed the wrong thing, so I have to do it again. Control A, Control C, Control A, Control V, and it doesn't want to for whatever insane reason. Most likely I have something weird going on in the layers. Sure enough, I have the wrong layer selected. Come back to the channel, the correct layer, come back to the channels, Control A, Control C, Control A, Control V. Now that I've got that, I can go into the brush and I can set the mode to overlay, for example. And now anything above 50% will be left alone. Everything below should be affected. So I can start coloring things in with a thick black brush. And that will allow me to isolate the very specific highlights. And then once I've got the highlights, I can use this as a mask, and then I can target specific pieces from there, which will allow me to leave everything else intact. All right, so that's one way to do it. I think a much easier way, let me turn off this alpha mask, clicking the eyeball, come back to layers. I think a much easier way is to, let me deselect, set this back to normal mode. Whew. Come up to select and do color range. Color range will allow me to target sampled colors. So I can just click the highlights. You can see it flinging around. And if I want to add more, I can use the plus icon. Boom. Increase the fuzziness to soften it up, or decrease it to make it harder. And tell it okay. Now, I can apply a mask right to this. Boom. So just for fun, make sure that I didn't put that backwards. I'm going to grab a brush real quick. You can see that I can come in and I could target just the highlight areas. Great. So now that I've got this mask on it, I can do things like overlay or multiply or color or screen or any of these guys, and I can start going through and finding something that works well in this case. Sometimes something as simple as soft light is sufficient to do a good start. So those are some of the tools that I'll be using. As I run across more, I will shout them out. But for the next bit, you're just going to watch me kind of work on the orange for a little bit. See you in a minute.